takes its name from the Roman god of war. A distant, rusty orb in the night sky. A source of rampant speculation for centuries. Could it be home to a rival civilization? Is there really a face on its surface? This intriguing planetary neighbor still captivates us. And as both a potential base for future colonization and the keeper of 4-billion-year-old biological secrets, Mars, the red planet, may hold the keys to both our future and our past.
Broadcasting live from the dark and cold dungeons deep beneath the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prepare yourselves to be taken away into another dimension as we now have control over your thoughts, fears, and perspective of the unexplained world you dare not speak of. With your hosts, Lindsay Knight and Michael Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, we now open the gates to the paranormal and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Paranormal and Beyond. Known to many as the Red Planet, the mystery surrounding the world of Mars has spawned decades of many science fiction stories and motion pictures exploring the fantasy of life existing on Mars. However, as science produced more powerful telescopes and rocket-propelled probes, they quickly revealed an equally awesome reality of the planet's surface, consisting of gigantic canyons and dust storms plus massive volcanoes that dwarf our earthly counterparts. But what many don't know is that the Red Planet itself is hiding a monumental secret like no other. In a moment, world-renowned author and New York Times bestseller Mike Bara will be joining us on the program to discuss the anomalies and artifacts on Mars, which he believes stems from a vast technologically advanced civilization that may have vanished in a cataclysmic event within our solar system. So get ready, because Mike Bara and Ancient Aliens on Mars is straight ahead when we turn right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Your ticket to the unknown is at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places, and more can be found at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. Knights with a K, ParanormalResearchSociety.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com, you're going to believe. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knights Paranormal Research Society.com.
just because you've seen it in the news doesn't mean it's real.
So you're telling me you got physically attacked by a ghost?
Like, I can tell you right now, I believe in the paranormal more than I believe in our government.
There are so many mysteries out there that are still yet to be explained.
You folks have some of your facts wrong, and you just keep talking about generalities.
With all due respect, sir, you have not brought anything to the table to prove us wrong.
This is the Paranormal and Beyond, and it's your show. Call us at 731-1230. Here again, Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight.
Welcome back to another brand new and out-of-this-world edition of the Paranormal and Beyond. But first, be sure to check us out at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com, where you can link up to all the past shows by simply clicking on that archive link above. That's Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Ever want to be an actor? Well, here's your chance. Log on to Hollywood-bound Acting Academy.com. Again, that's Hollywood-bound Acting Academy.com. Special shout out to all those listening worldwide through the KLAV1230am.com website, and all those driving around in the Vegas Valley listening to us on your stereos. I'm your host, Michael Knight. Joined alongside of me is your hostess, Lindsay Knight, your radio vigilantes, giving you the best in paranormal talk radio, one broadcast at a time. How are you doing, Lindsay?
I'm always doing well, Michael. How are you?
I am great. By the way, special shout out there to UFO Angel, who realized she lives in Vegas and can pick us up by turning on the radio. Just got her message. She's been 20 minutes finding out how she could download an app. Too funny, too funny.
Well, we have a great show tonight. One of my favorite topics, I know they say that a lot, but when it comes to Mars and a lot of anomalies out there, a lot of hidden things that people don't know about, and we're going to bring to the table tonight, and Mike Bara is going to do that. So actually, let's get into our topic, because our special guest, Mike Bara, is a New York Times best-selling author, lecturer, and TV personality. He began his writing career after spending more than 25 years as an engineering consultant for major aerospace companies, where he was a card-carrying member of the military-industrial complex. A self-described born-again conspiracy theorist, Mike's first book, Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA, co-authored with Richard C. Hoagland, was a New York Times bestseller in 2007. His second book, The Choice, which concerns hyperdimensional physics and how it relates to the Mayan calendar, Hopi prophecies in the current 2012 era, was published in 2010. In 2012, Mike published Ancient Aliens on the Moon from Adventures Unlimited Press, a new in-depth study of artificial structures on the moon and the secrets it has held for millions of years. In 2013, Mike returns with Ancient Aliens on Mars, a new book from Adventures Unlimited Press, which will look into the hidden history of Mars and the vast ancient civilization which was once flourished there. Mike has made numerous public appearances, lecturing on the subjects of space, science, NASA, physics, and the link between science and spirit, and has been a featured guest on radio programs like Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, and now making his first appearance on the Paranormal and Beyond. He is a regular contributor to the History Channel programs Ancient Aliens and America's Book of Secrets, both of which are now showing on the H2 channel. This month, Mike will be starring in a new alien investigation reality show for Animal Planet called Aliens Uncovered. It will be on air Tuesday, December 17th at 10 p.m. Eastern and Pacific on the Animal Planet Network. The Paranormal and Beyond would like to welcome to the program Mike Bara. How are you, Mike?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Great, thank you. And thank you again for coming on the program. I can't wait to talk to you, Mike, and this is very intriguing to us.
First off, Mike, tell us, how did you get into this?
Well, that's not the most interesting story in the world, but I'll tell you anyway. Just as a kid, I always was interested in UFOs and the space program. Up to the time I was just a little boy, I can remember watching, the Gemini and Apollo missions on TV and just being fascinated and always feeling like there was something that they weren't showing us, that there was some part that was missing. I remember the first moon landings and wondering why, if we had color TV, how come we were getting this crappy, terrible black and white picture back from the moon? Why weren't we getting color pictures? And later on, I found out the reasons why, which is that they were really trying to cover up a lot of stuff that was there that they were concerned we might be able to see. So anyway, I kind of went through life interested in this stuff, but the reality was I felt like UFOs were never something you'd ever be able to prove. I mean, back in the day, it was always, why aren't there any good films or videos of these things? And now there's a million good films and videos, and now everybody says it's all CGI. So I kind of felt like UFOs were something that was never going to get proven one way or the other. But then I ran into a tape of this guy, Hoagland, who was talking about this thing called the Face on Mars, which I had remembered from the 1970s Viking missions. And, talking about the other objects in the area. There's a whole city and pyramids and things nearby. And I kind of thought to myself, well, this is something that you could actually put your finger on. This is something you could actually prove if you could get honest, good pictures of the area. And so that became kind of my fascination and obsession. And then through a series of non-coincidences, I ended up meeting the guy and working with him on the website. And in 2007, we published Dark Mission, and it kind of just took off from there. So it's how it all happened.
Let's talk about, before we jump into Mars and fly over there, let's talk about the moon, because you have 2 books out, Ancient Aliens on the Moon and Dark Mission, which you just stated. Are the artifacts have some kind of similarity to Mars, or is it's kind of hard to put a date on stuff because this is like an event horizon that we can't even fathom right now. But what is your take when it comes to the moon itself? We did a lot of shows stating that, when you had the moon landing, that there was, chatter back and forth with Houston and Apollo talking about, Santa Claus and all this, and they're being watched by, aliens on the crater of the moon itself.
And this is probably like a 2-part question between Mike and myself, but I actually have a question myself. When they say that the moon landing, there's people that say the moon landing was actually fake, of course, and it was staged.
Right.
And they're saying that because of the Van Allen belt, there's no way to actually get to the moon. I mean, what's your take on that?
That's actually not true. I'm not a believer in the conspiracy theories that we never went to the moon. I think what's going on is that people are seeing the unnecessary secrecy around the Apollo program, and they're thinking that they're covering up that with the fact that we didn't go, when in fact what they're really doing is covering up why we went there and what we found. So I think people are just a little confused as to what the secrecy was all about. Now, as to that last point, the Van Allen belts, no, that's simply not true. I mean, radiation exposure, it's a question of, there's 2 things that make it fatal. It's the intensity and it's the length of time that you're exposed. And the reality is, the NASA astronauts, the Apollo astronauts, there was a fairly intense, amount of radiation that they would have absorbed through the Van Allen belts, but the fact is they were traveling through them at about 17,000 miles an hour. That means in less than an hour they were able to go through the belts, and so that minimized their exposure, both going to the moon and coming back. And they also wore dosimeters, DOS meters, which actually measured their radiation exposure. And anybody who wants to can go back and look at those records and see that they were not exposed to very high levels of radiation at all. And one other thing, which is that of the 12 guys who went to the moon and back, one of them died of cancer at a very young age. And that's, 1 out of 12, that's a pretty high incidence of cancer from possibly radiation exposure. So, I think the proof is pretty much there that we did go. And the excuses that they would have been fried like crispy critters in the Van Allen belts just simply don't hold up if you understand how radiation really works.
All right. So the artifacts on the moon itself, what was discovered or thought to be discovered?
Well, I think, you have to look at the moon missions. What I talk about in Ancient Aliens on the Moon, which is last year's book, the book I did previously, is that, all the missions seem to have different objectives. I think Apollo 11, for instance, was purely about let's get them there, let's land, let's perform our Masonic ceremony on the moon, which is what Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong actually did before they went on the first moonwalk. Let's get the pictures and let's get back home and get everybody safe and sort of establish that we can go to the moon and fulfill John F. Kennedy's vision, political vision. So I think that was all a symbolic mission, whereas other missions looked like they were definitely technology salvaging missions. For instance, Apollo 17, the very last mission, landed at a very particular place between mountains that looked to me like ruins, artificial structures. And I think that the whole purpose of those missions was to drive around the area and try to pick up pieces of technology and bring them back. So my sense is we brought back a lot more than just moon rocks. We brought back some other stuff to presumably try to reverse engineer and try to get new technologies from them, or to at least bring back proof that, the gods with a small g had actually been through these parts before. Like I think that the guys at NASA kind of already knew at the top levels. They already knew that we had not been alone in the solar system and somebody else had been here before.
Well, there's a lot of talk that during all the STS missions and space missions, they were being followed and watched closely.
Yeah, those rumors are out there. I'll tell you what, I did. The one thing I can put my finger on about that is I do have a friend named Ken Johnston Jr. who actually worked at the Cape during the Apollo missions. He trained a number of trained pretty much all the Apollo astronauts to actually fly the lunar module. And he told me that the rumor that they had actually seen UFOs on Apollo 11 and the rumor that Neil Armstrong had right after he said, the Eagle has landed, that he had flipped over to a private channel, and the astronauts did have private channels where they could talk to their doctors. He said that the rumor was floating around NASA immediately that this had happened, and that Armstrong had called up his doctor and said, there's UFOs on the crater. What do you want us to do about them? Do you still want us to go out? That kind of thing. So the fact that that rumor was so immediate, that it was spread through NASA immediately, gives it credence to me. But in terms of the reality of it beyond that, all I can say is I don't have any proof. There's no pictures. And Neil Armstrong went to his grave without saying so. So at this point, the only guy left, if that really happened, who could talk about it is Buzz Aldrin. And he's never said anything along those lines. In fact, I know somebody else who used to be good friends with Aldrin. And they were out golfing one day, and he finally decided to ask him about those rumors. And Buzz threw his golf clubs down, left him on the golf course, stomped away, and never spoke to his friend again. So
basically, it's true.
It's interesting stories, but there's no proof of any of that stuff, really. There's no proof.
Let me ask you this. I know, obviously the moon and Mars is two completely different planets, but as far as like the artifacts and the different monuments and so forth that has been shown as far as pictures go that the drones taken and the ones that they have taken as far as Mars goes. Is there any similarities or that they're the same on both planets?
They really are. They're really very different. I mean, primarily what you're looking at on the moon is you're looking over the horizon in the background. If you lighten up the background on a lot of pictures of the moon, what you will see is these sort of towering scaffolding type of structures that are barely visible. And Richard C. Hoagland asserted that those were made of glass, and I concur with that. They're made of a semi-transparent material, a glass-like material, and these were constructed essentially as a multi-layered meteor shield because in a lunar environment, in the vacuum, glass is actually stronger than steel, so it would be the perfect material to make a meteor shield out of. And then below that, you've got more interesting kinds of ruins. You see cities, you see areas that look like, streets of LA or something, and you see buildings and things that are a bit more similar. But on Mars, what you see is you not only see this big sculpted face that's been talked about for decades, but you see primarily pyramids. You see tetrahedral pyramids. You see pyramids that look a lot like the Giza pyramids. You see pentagonal pyramids. You see four-sided pyramids like the ones in China. And really, I've only ever seen one object on the moon that I would say is a pyramid, and that's a very controversial feature that I talked about in the Moon book, that I call the Daedalus ziggurat. It's in an area near a crater called Daedalus, and it looks like a ziggurat, an Egyptian, or not Egyptian, but an Iraqi style Mesopotamian ziggurat, which is a type of pyramid from that civilization. So other than that, there's not much similarity. They're really quite different, but that makes sense because they were very different environments. For instance, the moon has no atmosphere to speak of. And Mars, I think at the time the civilization flourished there, was just as warm and wet and cozy and habitable as the Earth is. So they're obviously two completely different environments. So you're going to have different kinds of structures that are going to be needed to survive there.
Are we looking at the moon as some sort of like mining camp or a jump off point?
It's hard to say that. What I can say really for sure from what I looked at on the moon is that it seems like, huge, vast parts of the planet have been modified. They've been altered. I mean, there are some images where, and I showed them in Ancient Aliens on the Moon, where you can actually look into the interior of the moon and you can see beams and girders and structures. You can see stuff actually inside as if the skin of the moon itself, some of it is fake, some of it is built up on top of the real surface. Although I have no doubt that the moon itself is a natural object originally, I think the thing has been modified to, just to the point that it's completely refurbished almost. Whereas Mars, is more of a natural satellite, and most of the stuff appears to be above ground in the form of pyramids and monuments and things that are really, quite interesting.
How far back are we looking at? Is this before mankind on Earth? And did the moon and Mars cohabitate together?
Well, the truth is, when you get into this stuff, you have to say to yourself, okay, who built this stuff and when did they build it and how old is it? And it's impossible to know without actually going there and seeing the condition of it. But given the condition of disrepair, I'd say that it's really been a long time ago. And when I say a long time, I'm saying, to me right now, the minimum is probably 1.35 million years. And the reason I put that date out is because it turns out that Mars' orbit is the second most elliptical or eccentric of all the planets, meaning that it should be circular, but in fact it's not. It's more of an egg-shaped orbit. Mercury being the most elliptical of the planets. And if you can trace back to a time when Mars' orbit was more circular, then I think you've reached back to a time when whatever happened that devastated the surface of Mars and killed the life there probably happened around that time. And there's a recent paper out that says that Mars' orbit was basically circular about 1.35 million years ago. So that's probably the soonest we can say that whatever cataclysm took place devastated the surface of the planet. Now, that's a long time ago in terms of our way of thinking. I mean, to us, 100 years is a long time. Most of us aren't going to live to even be 100 years old. But in geologic terms and celestial terms, it's really kind of the wink of an eye. It's not very long at all.
As far as to your knowledge, the rovers that we send to Mars and to the moon, is that as far as we've gone? Is it just to Mars, or are they trying to send another rover to another planet, or is this just too far reaching?
Well, I mean, as far as I know, yeah, Mars would be the place that we've gone, at least in the public space program. But of course, there's endless rumors of a private space program where they've had, basically flying saucer technology using hyperdimensional physics that I talked about in my second book, In the Choice, to go to these places many, many times before. And again, I can relate stories to you that are stories from friends who grew up around the space program and grew up around some of the astronauts and heard people like Gus Grissom complaining about the fact that they were spam in a can and we had this phony public space program with these rickety rockets while they were going to the moon and going to Mars and back in flying saucers, and that was back in the 60s they were saying that. So who knows at this point, but it seems to me that the rovers that we have today, the ones that we've publicly seen, they've all been to Mars. I don't think there's been any secret space programs anywhere else. I mean, Venus is a really, really nasty place. And so for a rover to survive there very long would be kind of a miracle. And until we really develop the ability to put a tank on the planet and that can survive 900-degree temperatures and things like that, it's really going to be difficult to get a rover on the surface of Venus, I would think.
Well, that's one thing I give to the ancient, astronauts out there is they really knew how to build stuff to last, the test of time. When it comes to the pyramids of Egypt and the ones in Sedona and all that stuff, they built stuff to last. Basically, that tells me they want people to know. That there was a then, now.
What do you think the Sphinx is? I mean, do you have any knowledge of what you think it might be? Does it have anything to do with, let's just say, the aliens?
You mean the Great Sphinx at Giza here on Earth?
Yes.
That Sphinx? Yeah. Well, that one, in that case, the interesting thing about the Sphinx, and I talk about this in Ancient Aliens on Mars, is that there's this connection between Egypt and Mars. It's really quite interesting. I mean, the Giza Plateau is in a city named Cairo. The word Cairo is an Arabic name for Mars. At one time, the Sphinx was actually painted red in honor of Mars, and it was considered to be a representation of the planet Mars. So why Mars would suddenly be represented by a human head and a feline body, I don't quite get that relationship, but definitely there's a message there, and they're trying to tell us something. And also there's been times when Mars has been aligned with the gaze of the Sphinx on certain specific dates of the year, on the solstices and things like that. And that sort of dates back to very, very early Egyptian civilization. So there's some sort of connection, but it's really not clear exactly what or how deep it goes at this point.
Well, a lot of people aren't even clear how far back ancient Egypt actually goes. And, I've done a lot of shows talk about Egypt, and I'm saying that, Egypt was already there. The people came, and these monuments superseded the humans. These are what we're looking at is basically like alien technology that's there, because when you compare that to the pyramids on Mars and that face, it's basically a mirror image that's reflecting back to us.
Yeah, there's definitely similarities there in terms of the layout, the architecture. There's just something familiar about them. I mean, the face on Mars itself kind of looks like the face of a pharaoh under certain conditions. So it's really interesting to make those observations and kind of say to yourself, there's got to be something here. The question is exactly what. How far does it go? How deep is it? And in my opinion, it's very, very significant. The question now is, like you say, how old is Egypt really? If you go to places like the Osirian in Abydos, Egypt, there's actually a wall there which lists the names of all the pharaohs, all the rulers of Egypt, that goes back over 10,000 years, okay? And according to all the sources, the Egyptian civilization's only goes back to about 4,000, 5,000 BC. So this goes way back beyond that. And what it means is that our concept of history and ancient history and our origins is just simply not correct, that there's something far more interesting and complex. I mean, why would the Egyptians name rulers that didn't exist? Why would they make up a pretend history of themselves and write it on the wall and go back, 10,500 years instead of just 4,500 years? It's quite bizarre.
Do you think that we were actually genetically engineered, like with this, Anunnaki, the Sumerians?
Yeah, I don't get into this too much in Ancient Aliens on Mars. I didn't have time because the book had a certain, had to be out at a certain time, and it had a certain amount of information could go into it. But this is something I want to talk about in the sequel, which is going to be Ancient Aliens on Mars 2.
Beautiful.
Next year. But I do think there is a connection. I mean, what's really interesting about Sitchin's interpretations of the Sumerian cuneiform text is what he says is that Nibiru, the word Nibiru, which is the planet that the Anunnaki say they came from, actually means planet of crossing. And another interpretation is planet of the crossing. In other words, it's not talking about the planet Nibiru making some sort of celestial cross in the sky, or crossing in front of Orion, or crossing in front of the sun. It's actually talking about where the human race and the Anunnaki were crossed. And I think that if you are going to add all that information up together at this point, to me, the most logical planet for that, the one that makes the most sense, is Mars, because there's definitely Mars had a civilization at one time. It was very advanced, and it could have been a way station, a stop-off point for the Anunnaki for whatever that they might have been doing here.
All right, let's go back to Mars now, and let's talk about the enigmas there and the artifacts. It's hard to even fathom and think about what was there during its heyday, say when everybody was hustling and bustling on Mars. But
right.
This is mind blowing. If you think about how old Earth was, how old is Mars, and before that? But so we're talking about an alien race, technologically advanced, that we can't even imagine. What was found there? There's a lot of, rover missions, take a lot of pictures, and there's some that leaked, but basically all I see is sand. And why would they hinder like the greatest find in history?
Well, you got to look a little closer is what I'll say to you. I've gone through a lot of the rover pictures, and I see, look, I was a structural engineer, aerospace engineer in my previous life, mechanical engineer. And a lot of these so-called rocks in these areas where we landed are not rocks. They are mechanisms. They're boxes. They're equipment. I can see stuff inside. There's like the outer shell of a box is eroded away, and inside is some sort of like flywheel devices. On some of these, I see things that look like big air conditioning units. I mean, it's phenomenal when you really start looking at it. And these things are everywhere. There was a piece by a guy named Seth Shostak, who runs the SETI Institute in California, where they spend all their time, hoping desperately that ET will call them on the radio and say hi. And he was mocking this idea, calling it, pareidolia, which is this ludicrous skeptic's term that it's not even a real condition, claiming that people are just seeing things that don't exist. And I'll tell you, I'm an engineer, and I see stuff all over these pictures that appears to me to be mechanical instruments, mechanical devices, structural stuff that's been broken and battered and tossed around by some really big bad disaster on the planet Mars. So to me, I don't see sand. I mean, there are places, certainly I see rocks and I see sand, and there's other places these rovers go, and I'm looking at stuff going, hey, there's a rock with a completely flat face, as if somebody sheared it off, and there's regularly spaced dots or holes in it, which look like, bolts to me. And then there's a very square opening in the front of it, and NASA will drive right by that rock, and as far as we know, they never turn the camera to look inside that little square box and, look inside that object and see if there's something in there. So to me, I think there might be lots of really good pictures of some of this stuff, but it just doesn't show up. And this is, again, something I have in Ancient Aliens on Mars, is I have examples of images, for instance, from the Pathfinder landing site, where there are objects that appear to be mechanical and not geologic. And NASA has actually wallpapered right over them. They will just simply take and just induce digital artifacts right over them, or they'll misregister the red, green, blue filter colors so that the objects become very blurry. There's even other cases where the Europeans have processed the same images, and on their versions, you can see plain as day that these things are mechanisms. On the NASA versions, they're sometimes even just completely erased. They're just gone. Like NASA just took a little blotting pen and just blotted them right out. So, again, I can't really agree with you. What I see some really fascinating stuff on a lot of these pictures.
Okay, let's talk about the most pivotal stuff that you've encountered, not yourself personally, but that you investigated that's on there that it's just mind-boggling.
I hope I don't encounter any of this stuff personally.
One of them being, let's just say this. I've seen pictures, and I don't know, a lot, obviously some of them are doctored, but I've seen pictures that they found little animals or like lizards and what have you.
Well, those are interesting. I mean, the thing is, I don't know what some of those are. They certainly look like rats and lizards and things like that. And you got to ask yourself in a situation like that, I guess if there were critters like that on the planet and something happened very, very quickly to the planet Mars, they would then become maybe frozen in place like almost immediately. So you would think that you would have skeletal remains. But then on the other hand, I think to myself, well, given the conditions on Mars, if we've not been really lied to in a significant way, given the conditions there, how could anything biologically that complex really survive and not have decayed? And I really don't know that I can say for sure that makes any sense. I have seen pictures of things that look like skulls, some sort of weird alien skull on Mars.
Yeah,
and
it looks like a Terminator head.
Actual credible. Yeah, there's a head thing there on some of the rover pictures, so those might be credible. But the other stuff, it's really hard to tell. But I mean, I look around those pictures, and next to the rat, I see things that look like pliers and instruments, and it's really hard to completely dismiss them. But I can't really go there either. There's
also a picture of what looks like a Bigfoot on there. Have you seen that one?
That one?
No, I haven't. I have to confess, I have not seen the Bigfoot on Mars, but maybe I should dig into that one for the next
I've
book.
seen that.
Well, it looks like some sort of bipedal humanoid or something standing there. There's just a lot of stuff. Okay, and there's a lot of talk when you talk about Cydonia itself. Okay,
right?
Grid-like cities, you can see it, and we're talking about a huge city-wide block of streets and canals and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the thermal infrared images, which, again, I didn't get to in this book. It's going to have to go in Ancient Aliens on Mars, too. But there is thermal infrared images of the Cydonia area that came out with this vast cityscape just right under the ground there, as if there was one civilization that lived once on the surface, but then when the surface became uninhabitable, they built under the ground or under the ice because there might be a layer of ice there. So it all goes back to whatever was this big giant cataclysm that hit the planet and made it uninhabitable. And I read about that in the book quite a bit. I discuss, where Mars really probably came from and the fact that it's probably not a planet at all. It's actually the moon of a planet that no longer exists, that was pretty much in the same orbit Mars is today, but it somehow was destroyed. It blew up, something along those lines, and all the debris from that explosion is what devastated Mars and wiped out the oxygen and tore half the atmosphere away basically and made it a kind of a cold, dry, uninhabitable hell.
Are we any closer to stepping foot on Mars ourselves?
No, I don't think so. There's a lot of these kind of gimmick things like the Mars One program, or the idea that they're going to send somebody to Mars and they're just going to live and die there and all that stuff. And again, my friend Ken is trying to get in on that project, but the reality is I don't think we're any closer. It seems like we've really suspended our manned space program, or we're not really interested in moving forward. And is that simply a function of, the party in power at the moment? Democrats are no longer really the space visionaries. They'd rather spend the money on other things here on Earth. And nobody seems to be taking the lead to get us to Mars. It seems like the last president, President Bush, tried to get a program going, but it's all been killed now. So, I mean, right now we're not even sending astronauts into low Earth orbit, so we don't really even have a space program anymore, as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think there's a reason why we haven't gone up? There's been a lot of celestial events lately. There was one over, I think, Utah or Phoenix, where they seen this light anomaly, just sonic boom, and fly past.
And I've heard about the ISON. What is that? I've read a lot about that.
They were trying
lately.
to connect that to, well, ISON was supposed to have died, wrapping around the sun and melt off, but a lot of people are saying, no, it's still there, and it's coming.
Well, it's coming. I don't know if it's going to hit us. Just logically, in terms of long-term thinking, okay, let's face the reality that sooner or later, something bad's going to happen. We're going to get hit with a big solar flare. There's these things they found on the moon they called glazed donuts, and what they basically were was clumps of lunar material that had been seared to something like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of degrees in an instant, and they were basically took the surface and turned it to glass almost instantaneously. And for that to have happened, the moon would have had to have been hit by a solar flare that was, I think, something like 100. The output of the sun would have increased by 100,000 times its normal energetic output over like 1/20th of a second for that to have happened. So a flare like that would basically wipe out civilization on Earth. It would be devastating to us, at least the side of the Earth that was facing the sun. It was in daytime. And you look at meteors and you look at asteroids and you say to yourself that logically we should have another home. We should have someplace else to go where we might have a little protection from this. And Mars makes the most sense, not only because I think we came from there initially, but because with a little bit of seeding, by simply putting down simple plants that consume carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. If we really worked on a project and got started today, we might be able to make the planet habitable in as little as 100 years.
I mean, absolutely.
That would be really that would be a grand project for the human race to engage in, to give us a second home.
That's only going to happen when it comes down to it. But we're very well equipped with terraforming a planet. I know we can do that. We can probably clone people now. Do you think, because if you really sit back and you look at Mars and what happened to Mars, that they were probably blasted with a big solar, ray, and they went underground because of the glass tubes they're finding there, that would be our first thing to do as well, as go underground to avoid this. So we're sort of mimicking what happened in the past.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy how history seems to be repeating itself, isn't it? I mean, if you take, what happened to Mars, I mean, basically it sounds like, as they put it in the film Armageddon, basically all the worst parts of the Bible seem to be what happened to the planet Mars back in the day. And the question is, if it could happen here, then why aren't we taking more steps to protect ourselves from it? I mean, I don't get why the entire power grid of the United States is not buried underground and shielded from electromagnetic pulse. It just simply makes sense to me. But we've had successive administrations that don't seem to want anything to do with that. That would be a hell of a good stimulus project that would actually there'd actually be some use for it. I mean, it's just amazing to me we're in the 21st century and we still have power and telephone lines, running on telephone poles above the ground. It's kind of bizarre to me. It's like something out of the 1800s, and I feel like that's something we should move forward on.
Like I told Lindsay, back in the 80s, everybody had Polaroid cameras, a cheap laptop, one of those big cell phones, and now everybody has
laptops were not cheap back in the 80s.
Oh yeah,
dude.
But now everything is shrunk down to today into an iPhone, and all that is combined into one iPhone, but yet we're still on the same gasoline engine. It's like, come on, man.
Well,
what's going on here?
I was telling on another show that we did last week, I was saying, as far as like, we don't have any Thomas Edisons or, any like Nostradamuses or anything like that.
Nobody.
No philosophical people that we can actually.
Well, here's the thing, Mike, looking back at ancient Egypt, and being that of a great blueprint, there's stories that they had power that came from the ground, that they had a staff to light the inside because there's no, sear marks on the wall or charcoal burn from, torches, what everybody thinks. But they actually had power back then.
Right. there's those theories. Those have been, obviously talked about on the Ancient Aliens show, which I've been lucky enough to be a part of, and that stuff is all interesting. And what I wonder is this information, is this technology that we've forgotten, or is it that we used to intuitively know how to do these things and we're not as intuitive as we used to be? I mean, are we in kind of a dark age where we're trying to solve every problem technologically as opposed to solving it intuitively, by creating things? And I don't know, are there no more Marconis or Edisons or Teslas around right now, or are they simply co-opted by the government at a very early age and put on the payroll? I mean, I don't know. I don't know why we don't create geniuses anymore. Geniuses today are actually kind of dumb. I mean, we have people like, Stephen Hawking that say some really dumb things, and they're very embedded in the standard models of physics, which, as I talked about in my second book, The Choice, none of them pan out. I mean, if you get into any of the basic laws of physics, they're all kind of nonsense. None of them are really laws. You have to create exceptions to the rules in order to have any rules, and that's an indication that our current theories of physics are broken. But if you try to venture outside that, if any physicist tries to do any experiments in rotation and other things,
that thing don't exist.
Their career's over, because they're just not going to get funding for that kind of thing, and they're going to be called a crackpot. So we live in a time where that's not really encouraged. Here's free thinking.
Here's a very ironic thing, okay? Let's say a solar flare hits us, we go underground, we terraform Mars again. We're just jumping back and forth, till we get smart enough to go beyond that. But like you said, we're really not doing nothing for humanity as a whole, because something can happen. There's a lot of people out there who's feeling something is on the horizon. It's bad. You have FEMA out there buying all these, body bags and, all these ammunition, and everybody's asking, who are they going to attack? And it's us. Something is going to break out where we're going to have to be controlled in some way. And I do think it's something cosmic that's going to happen. Do you think?
Well, you need to read my second book. You need to read The Choice, because all this stuff is being driven by physics. And what I wanted to talk about in that was that, the 2012 thing is just the opening of the window. The Mayan calendar thing is just the beginning of upheaval. And what's going on is the whole human race is sort of being driven by the physics of our reality to change. And there's going to be a lot of shifts and changes. And the government guys, they need to kind of give up the idea of controlling this, because the more they try to control, they're going to invariably make the wrong decisions, and they're actually going to make things worse. They're going to create more chaos by trying to keep a lid on it. What they need to do instead is try to figure out, and make predictions about where society and culture is headed, and try to lead the way in those directions. And I think a kind of a world unifying space program, the kind of thing that John F. Kennedy actually envisioned and presented at the UN back in 1963, would be great for the planet. It would be great for all of us to get together and put some money into not just this dopey International Space Station that floats around and does nothing, but to actually go to Mars and start to terraform it for the benefit of the human race. Because the thing about Mars is right now there really isn't anybody using the place, so we may as well go and try to make it into something that we can make use of.
Well, that's the problem, Mike. Nobody is doing that. Everybody forgot about humanity, and everybody's so lost in being conformed to believe this that nobody has an opinion no more. When you're talking about the laws of physics, that only exists within our world. But once you pass that, it's totally different. Everybody's going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? You already know NASA. We talk to a lot of people and say NASA has a department where they smudge out all these artifacts and then throw out, these bogus pictures. We all seen STS missions where you see this thing floating by and they're talking, oh, look to your right, you got a UFO there.
And then they
cut it out and you're in Houston control room.
Yeah.
But why not? Just tell us and get it over with.
Well, I think that they're constrained. I mean, you got to remember, NASA doesn't make these decisions. NASA is an adjunct of the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense are the guys who decide what gets released and what doesn't, and what's classified and what's not classified. And NASA at the very beginning of the very beginning of the space program, when they were first formed, commissioned this report called the Brookings Report. And the Brookings Report is this really interesting report by the Brookings Institute, which was the #1 think tank in the world at the time. And they were put to the question, what do we do if we find something? Because they concluded pretty quickly, you're not probably going to meet ET out there, the Apollo 11 stories notwithstanding. You're probably not going to meet ET out there, but you might actually find exactly what we're talking about tonight, which is artifacts. It actually uses the word artifacts, or the remnants of some highly advanced civilization on the moon or on Mars or on Venus. And it recommended that if you do find that, you should probably not tell anybody, because history is full of examples of cultures that thought they were the top of the heap. They thought that they were the most advanced thing out there. And when they found out they weren't, their civilization collapsed. And it even says right in the report that there is a distinct possibility that our civilization could, quote, disintegrate. And so this report, I think, was very powerful. I think that the recommendations of the report became policy at NASA. I think in many ways the report was specifically commissioned as a method of political cover for anything NASA did find. They can always go back and say, well, we had this report. We weren't trying to hide things from the American people. We were just trying to protect you from yourselves. So that right there is a very powerful deterrent, and a reason why they might think about covering things up, why they wouldn't tell us, because they're afraid if they tell us that we're going to go crazy and stop shopping at Walmart and stop moving forward and,
oh, God
with
forbid
life.
that
and, it's really interesting too, just a little side note on this, which is that Stanley Kubrick said that 2001: A Space Odyssey was based on the Brookings Report. There's a Playboy magazine interview, and I want you to know, in this magazine, I only read the interview. I did not look at the pictures. But Kubrick actually could quote from the Brookings Report chapter and verse. I mean, he knew this thing by heart. And again, it's weird. It's almost as if 2001 is part of what it recommends, which is a period of cultural conditioning and getting us ready to the point where we won't go crazy if we find out there's something superior to us out there.
That apparent comet that hit last year in Russia that came down and broke into pieces, there was a lot of video of different videos, and I don't know if it was just me seeing things and Mike seeing things, but we noticed that something like intercepted. Are we being protected in a way? And did you see that could have been a spaceship or UFO?
I have not seen. I've seen the video of a fireball. I have not seen a video that shows anything intercepting it. Now, don't kid yourself for a minute that we don't have, and the Russians don't have, missile defense systems. I'm sure that we do. I'm sure that missile defense systems could be adapted to intercept comets and asteroids, provided you see them coming. So I'm not going to discount that. Could it be our space brothers in the UFOs? I suppose. I mean, I'm working on a new project now that you guys mentioned, this Uncovering Aliens show, where we're talking to people that seem to have a lot of contacts with these guys, and I think that there definitely are some extraterrestrials, some aliens actually, around the planet and visiting from time to time.
Do you think we're inhabited right now amongst us?
Inhabited, I don't know. I suppose if they are here, that they have to have bases. So I would guess in the sense we're inhabited. You hear all kinds of stories. I mean, the first episode of the show, we're going to listen to some stories from people who claim that there's bases near Sedona, Arizona, where there actually are humans and aliens working together on some sorts of secret projects. And, it's hard. You listen to these stories and, enough people tell you this and they're credible and they're not crazy, and you begin to think to yourself there might be something to it. So, I don't know. I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but I think it's a distinct possibility.
Okay, let's talk about your new show coming up, since we're talking about that. Is this all, the genre is all about UFO alone?
Yeah, well, it's about aliens. It's called Uncovering Aliens. It's going to be on Animal Planet. And actually, the times have changed slightly. It's going to be on, right now it shows at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, which is 8 o'clock Pacific on Animal Planet HD, and then on at 11 o'clock Eastern and Pacific on regular standard definition Animal Planet. But who watches standard definition TV anymore? Nobody, right? So you got two chances to see it. It looks like on Sunday night, December the 15th, just this Sunday coming up. And it's called Uncovering Aliens. And I've got three co-stars on the show who I'm not going to mention because I'm the star of the show, really.
Beautiful.
But,
I love it.
The premise I'm just kidding. They're great. I got Maureen Ellsbury, who's a UFO journalist, Daryl Sims, who's the alien hunter, and a gentleman named Stephen Jones from England, who's an experiencer and has actually had experiences. So what we've been tasked with is to go out and actually investigate recent sighting cases. We're not going to be doing the same old crap that everybody else does, where we go to Rendlesham Forest, or we go talk about the Phoenix Lights and talk to witnesses from
or you go stand
20 years ago.
You
We're
go
going to
stand by the
investigate current
51
cases.
sign.
We're going to focus on cases where there's something for us to actually test. And you know how you guys ever, it's going to be on right after Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet. You guys ever watch Finding Bigfoot?
Well, yeah, we just had Cliff Barackman on the show.
Right. And you notice how they never actually find Bigfoot?
Where is Bigfoot?
What I will tell you about our show is we are going to find UFOs, and we are going to find some interesting stuff. In the episodes we shot already, we've come up with some really, really interesting stuff. And this is, I think, really going to be different for people. It's going to be a really exciting new kind of reality show about UFO investigation. It's going to take it to a different level it hasn't been taken to before. And I really hope everybody watches it and lets Animal Planet know if you like it. If you do, there'll be more.
Is this the first UFO show on Animal Planet?
Yeah, they've never done anything like this before. But, I guess Finding Bigfoot is their most popular show. And other people have been doing alien shows. And I think what it was is after watching Chasing UFOs last year, they decided, oh, my God, we got to be able to do better than that. So they put this show together. So, I'm really looking forward to the debut of it. Not looking forward to seeing how much weight I'd gained on that shoot. But, hey, my weight fluctuates. So I guess I got to live with that. Camera puts 10 pounds on, folks. I just want everybody to know that. But it should be a great show, and it's going to be really something different and interesting. And like I said, if we get enough people to watch it and show some enthusiasm, there'll be a lot more uncovering aliens coming up.
Let me ask you this, because everybody who's since you've done a lot of research and are now doing your new show on aliens. Now, I'm not saying you're an abductee or anything, but have you gotten any closer as far as yourself, like found anything yourself?
That is very alien.
That is very alien related. Exactly, like Mike said.
Okay, I spent the first several decades of my life, I had never seen anything. Okay, I'm an aerospace guy. I mean, where I used to grow up was kind of in the approach pattern of SeaTac Airport in Seattle. I saw many, many things in the sky. I had never, ever seen a UFO. I was in New York City. We were shooting what's called the sizzle reel for the show, where they bring in a bunch of candidates for the show, and then they shoot us and decide which 4 out of the 8 or 9 that they want for the show. And we were on the roof of a hotel in Brooklyn, me and a couple of my female co-stars, and we were having a couple of beers, and a UFO came flying right up over the hotel.
Man, pick
floated
you.
there and stayed there and then left. And it was but I'm an aerospace guy. I know my planes, I know my helicopters, I know what a Chinese lantern is. I know all these explanations, and I have never seen anything like this object. It was definitely something completely unusual. And then again, as part of the show in Sedona, in the episode you're going to see this weekend, on Sunday night, the sneak preview episode, we were shooting with night vision equipment, and long after we shouldn't have been able to see anything because the sun had set and satellites wouldn't even be illuminated, we had 3 UFOs fly in formation over our location, and I got them on night vision. So I've now had 2 flying saucer UFO type experiences that I cannot explain. I can guarantee you this: they weren't airplanes, they weren't satellites, at least they weren't human powered satellites. And they were very bizarre experiences, and I've never had anything like that until now. So I guess it's something to do with my involvement with the show. Seems to be triggering this.
It was meant to be. All right, we're running out of time. I tell everybody where they can get your book.
You can get Ancient Aliens on Mars or Ancient Aliens on the Moon or any of the other books through my website, which is mikebara.blogspot.com. That's just B-A-R-A. So just type Mike Bara, B-A-R-A, into Google. It'll come right up. You can order books there. There's instructions on how to, if you want to get a signed autographed copy, how to order one from Amazon. And so pick them up on Amazon.com, pick them up from Adventures Unlimited Press. You can go directly to their website, or you can go to your local bookstore. I mean, David Hatcher Childress is my publisher. He's got great distribution, and Ancient Aliens on Mars and Ancient Aliens on the Moon are still in most bookstores. So go to your local Barnes & Noble and pick them up there. And by all means, keep checking out Ancient Aliens. I've shot season 6 for that show. There's going to be an episode on Mars that's going to be coming up here in season 6 that everybody who reads the book is going to want to see. And then Uncovering Aliens on Sunday night, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. look for it. Check your local listings. I know in Phoenix it's a different time. So,
all right, Mike. Thank you for being on the program. Great conversation, and everybody log on to his website. Join us back here Friday as we unmask religion, the most controversial show we're going to do, and basically rip it apart and put it back together. What is religion? You'll find out. Tune back here Friday on the Paranormal Beyond. Everybody enjoy your Thursday. See you right back here Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.
Mysterious places and more can be found at Knights Paranormal Research Society.com. Knights with a K, Paranormal Research Society.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at Knights Paranormal Research Society.com, you're going to believe. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knights Paranormal Research.
Science fiction stories and motion pictures exploring the fantasy of life existing on Mars. However, as science produced more powerful telescopes and rocket-propelled probes, they quickly revealed an equally awesome reality of the planet's surface consisting of gigantic canyons and dust storms plus massive volcanoes that dwarf our earthly counterparts. But what many don't know is that the red planet itself is hiding a monumental secret like no other. In a moment, world-renowned author and New York Times bestseller Mike Bara will be joining us on the program to discuss the anomalies and artifacts on Mars, which he believes stems from a vast technologically advanced civilization that may have vanished in a cataclysmic event within our solar system. So get ready, because Mike Bara and Ancient Aliens on Mars is straight ahead when we return right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Your ticket to the unknown is at Knights Paranormal Research Society.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings,
and our past.
Broadcasting live from the dark and cold dungeons deep beneath the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prepare yourselves to be taken away into another dimension as we now have control over your thoughts, fears, and perspective of the unexplained world you dare not speak of. With your hosts, Lindsay Knight and Michael Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, we now open the gates to the paranormal and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Paranormal and Beyond. Known to many as the Red Planet, the mystery surrounding the world of Mars has spawned decades of many...
Society.com.
Just because you've seen it in the news doesn't mean it's real.
So you're telling me you got physically attacked by a ghost?
Like I can tell you right now, I believe in the paranormal more than I believe in our government.
There are so many mysteries out there that are still yet to be explained.
You folks have some of your facts wrong, and you just keep talking about generalities.
With all due respect, sir, you have not brought anything to the table to prove us wrong.
This is the Paranormal and Beyond, and it's your show. Call us at 731-1230. Here again, Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight.
Welcome back to another brand new and out-of-this-world edition of the Paranormal and Beyond. But first, be sure to check us out at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com, where you can link up to all the past shows by simply clicking on that archive link above. That's Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Ever want to be an actor? Well, here's your chance. Log on to Hollywood Bound Acting Academy.
It takes its name from the Roman god of war, a distant rusty orb in the night sky, a source of rampant speculation for centuries. Could it be home to a rival civilization? Is there really a face on its surface? This intriguing planetary neighbor still captivates us. And as both a potential base for future colonization and the keeper of 4 billion-year-old biological secrets, Mars, the red planet, may hold the keys to both our future